sudden. So then we can help either amplify them, or how can we get that message out to other developers so they can learn from it as well. So we're tracking all these numbers internally, and that's how we determine whether or not, scientifically, whether or not things are going well. And our developer advocates, of course, measure how happy developers are by listing on mailing lists and stuff. But for the virtuous cycle like world where, like you were saying before, for us it's really important that we get happy developers, because those will create applications that'll get happy users. More users will attract more developers to the platform, and this sort of cycles round and round. We listen very heavily to our developers. We're trying to have quarterly roadmap and planning open forum meetings at the Twitter headquarters where developers can come. We'll tell them what our roadmap is for the next few months, and we actively ask for feedback on whether these are things people want to use. Like, we definitely have some insight into the platform. We have a lot more data than anyone else has, but sometimes our developers really surprise us on the functionality they want in our system. In some ways that we're like, wow, that's actually really monetizable. Like, we should help you do that because that'll be better for everyone involved. It'll help you make a lot of money. It'll help us get really active users, active engaged users who then might want to use other Twitter properties simultaneously. So we have a very open dialogue. Like, we invite any developer to come and honestly even talk to me directly and tell me what their requirements are. We'll go build it. We try to iterate very rapidly. We've been having some scaling problems recently, but we try to iterate really rapidly and take into account what developers really want.
Cool. Tom and Praveen, do you guys have anything to add to sort of the way developers are engaged in the planning process? Do you guys think about your roadmap?
Well, I mean, I would actually just add to that. I think our experience with Flickr has been the virtuous cycle. I mean, that's a really important part of the development process and working with the community. I mean, if you look at Flickrs on every cell phone, every cameras now, photo frames come with Flickr embedded in them, and that's been really important for the growth of Flickr. I mean, we absolutely couldn't have had Flickr be the success it is today without developers, and it really wouldn't have existed in that way.
But do folks that want to build to that Flickr interface, that want to build a piece of hardware, if they come across a new requirement, something that they need, how do they sort of engage into your requirements process?
So Flickr's actually, for a long time, Flickr have had forums dedicated to developers since almost the inception of the site. And I think that's been really critical, having that kind of feedback. And I don't think it's quite as formalized as Rack is doing right now, but that's I feel that's okay. I think the main thing is to have a channel where if people want to communicate, you can actually say, this is what we want, this is why we want it, and you can have a dialogue.
At PayPal, we actually follow pretty similar approach as Flickr did. Most of the times we get feedback through multiple channels, not just through one channel. Extracom is one, through Twitter is one, and then direct personal talking with I was talking with you before the event, and then you gave me some feedback. So we take those feedback back into the company, and then we actually host a bi-weekly feedback review meeting with stakeholders from everyone across the company, not just the guy who's writing the API, but even the guys from the product unfortunately, a lot of people, most of the entrepreneurs actually don't really think about how they're gonna monetize it. They're gonna go ahead and start building it and launch it, and in the future they'll have troubles in trying to figure out how to monetize. I mean, there might be clear ways to monetize, but the way they're built might not make it possible. So the most of the recent times, the way we are seeing people doing is they come up with the idea and then they try to write down all the various ways they can monetize. Not just selling the app, but different kinds of newer monetization models. There are fortunately a lot of ways to do monetization nowadays. No longer just the one-time pay and then receive the money. Then once you figure that out, how you're going to monetize, try to keep that in mind when you're building the application, because you're going to design your core application once. You're not going to go back and keep redesigning and re-implementing the whole thing again and again. So try to put hooks in place, so when you're building the application, you have ways to start monetizing it. The next thing that comes into play is what exactly are the ways you're going to monetize, and what are your options out there. Now you shop around and you see what does PayPal has, what does FPS has, what does Authorize.net has. Once you have all the requirements written down, it's actually pretty easy to come down to a few choices. And once you have a few choices, the next thing to look at is how easy it is to go and implement them. Some of them provide a lot of SDKs and libraries that make your life very easy, as installing a simple gem and you're done, or simply dropping in a jar file and you have the whole functionality in place. And some of them also need to look at are they going to require you to be PCI compliant, DSS security, and all those kinds of things. So all those things you should probably keep in mind when you're comparing the solutions out there. Those will be pretty much the main ones. And other thing that keeps coming up recently is long-term sustaining your product, not just sustaining in the terms of maintaining your application, but how your application, how your payment provider is actually going to support you. So there are cases where you want to have better customer support from the provider too. We were talking with before, on somehow some of the newer, smaller companies are actually doing very well in providing better customer service and everything, because they're concentrating on very small niche use case, and they're doing it very well. So if those are the kind of things that you really need, you should really look out for those, and not just look at one big provider and think that I'm going to just go with a provider. Fortunately, big providers are looking into it and making things easy. And sometimes if they know that they're not going to make it easy, they're actually making at least the service provided as simple APIs that you can mix and match in the way that you want. So all those things will actually help you in the long term, how you're going to